everybody. I want to welcome everyone to our workshop today, using AI to disrupt business as usual for evaluation practitioners and firms with consultants from intention to impact. Today's event is sponsored by American University's Measurement and Evaluation Program. At American University, we are committed to pursuing inclusive excellence. One of our practices shared from our Indigenous and Native communities is to offer a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our meetings and events. The goal is to build our mindfulness of historical processes in which we still participate. American University is founded on the unceded land of the Nacotchtank and Anacostan Piscataway peoples. I ask you to join me in acknowledging these communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. American University also acknowledges that it was founded exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples, including those whose land this institution is located. With this acknowledgement, we commit to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. Those of you who attend our events know that we always provide a land acknowledgement. I would encourage you to take this a step further and do some research on the land where you are sitting. If you're not aware of the history of the land, you can click the link in the chat and research it, or send a text to the number in the chat as well. So that'll be popping up from Lisa. Okay. As we get started today, I would like to introduce you to our student team overseeing today's workshop. I will be moderating our Zoom chat. My name is Yasmin Shimshek, and introducing our speaker and fielding any questions on Zoom. Lisa will be our Facebook live stream moderator, who will let us know if any questions arise on the Facebook feeds. She will also wrap up the session at the end, give us a summary of what we've learned today. So before we get started, I would like to hear from all of you where you're joining from. If you'd like to perhaps write in the chat box where you are joining us from, and I'll read them aloud, some of them. So many of you joining us today, very exciting. And Lisa, do you see anybody coming in on Facebook?
There's no one right now.
Colombia, hey, Charlottesville, welcome. Oh, two people from Charlottesville, Virginia. Uganda, Abarigani. Welcome, welcome. California, we're happy to have you too. Ukraine, wow, awesome. It's so great to see such a global audience from all over the world. Thank you so much for being here today. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A section or into the chat, and I will be moderating them from the Zoom chat. And we have a number of speakers today who are consulting from a firm called Intention to Impact. I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves because I am so nervous and excited to have them today. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Yasmin and Lisa. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on emerging AI in evaluation practice. My name is Nina Sabarre. I'm the founder and CEO of Intention to Impact, better known as I2I for short. I am also based in the DC area where American University is. And actually, fun fact, I am an alumni from the same program. I finished the program in 2015 and then went off to get my PhD in evaluation and applied research. So this was really the launch pad for my academic career in evaluation. And I'm a big fan of the program. I am an adjunct professor and I often teach capstone project, I guide students through capstone projects in this program. So if I don't know you yet, I hope to get to know you soon. And I'm joined here today with my colleague and friend, Blake Beckmann. Blake, do you want to hop off mute and introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, thank you, Nina. I didn't know those things about you. My name is Blake Beckmann. I actually met Nina in grad school here in California. We went to Claremont Graduate University together. I'm a senior evaluation consultant with Intention to Impact. I've been with Intention to Impact for about 3 years now. And yeah, thank you for having us. This is an exciting topic. And as many of you are still in your graduate programs, I'm hoping that you can gain some benefit from the tools we're about to discuss.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this presentation. And again, if you have questions, don't be afraid to hop in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So here's a quick rundown from our presentation today. We're first going to start with a little bit more context setting about who we are, what we do, and why we even use AI. What is it? Why are we using it? And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time together demoing our favorite AI tool. This is where it gets most interesting. And then leave you with some closing thoughts and discussion. So before we do that, I did want to launch this quick Zoom poll. So hold on, let me see if I can figure this out. Here it is. Okay, I just launched a poll. If you could chime in, how ready are you to integrate AI tools in your evaluation practice? Are you kicking and screaming with resistance, hesitant and unsure, curious and waiting to see what's possible, starting to dabble, or are you fully using it, embracing it, and already seeing its value? We'll wait a couple minutes to see how people are feeling. So far, I'm seeing a plurality around curiosity and waiting to see what's possible. And then I'm happy to see that there's about half who are either starting to dabble or using it and seeing its value. And just a couple that are still kicking and screaming with resistance and hesitant, which is totally fair. I understand that. And we'll talk about some of those things that make you be feeling resistant. All right. Well, thank you all for that. I'll go ahead and get back to the slides. So really quick, a few, just a little bit more about who we are as a firm. Intention to Impact is a social impact consulting firm that uses research, evaluation, and strategy to help purpose-driven organizations measure and maximize impact. Our senior leadership team consists of myself, Kathleen Dahl, Sahidi Baskara, and Blake, and we're also supported by about a dozen consultants and subject matter experts. Our mission is to accelerate impact, influence, and innovation for a more just and sustainable future. In a few slides, I'll share more about what that looks like. And our vision is a world where funders, social enterprises, and governments use data to be more effective, efficient, and equitable in how they serve communities and contribute to positive systems change. So in the past 5 years, we've had the privilege of serving over 30 clients, advancing important causes ranging from food security, to housing affordability, justice reform, environmental justice, transparency and accountability of government, medical research, and social entrepreneurship, among many other topics. So as you can see, we work across a wide variety of sectors and issue areas. And as a firm, we really are generalists in practice, but our expertise lies in the art and science of measuring social impact. All right, so now into the AI stuff. So starting in January of 2023, we were invited to write an article for the journal New Directions for Evaluation about the topic of AI. And this is not at all because we are experts in AI. Honestly, back then, when we were invited to write this journal article, we had zero experience using AI. We were just curious and willing to try it. So if you are a member of the American Evaluation Association, you have free access to that whole NDE issue, which covers AI and evaluation from a variety of perspectives, from more historical and research-based perspectives to thoughts on ethics and values, and the kind of training needed to use AI. Our article features AI from the vantage point of a small evaluation business. So that's where we're talking from today. We've spent the past year experimenting with AI products and comparing their use to how we typically do evaluations to see how, if at all, it can help us save time, money, and ultimately allow us to provide more value for clients. When we first started noodling about the potential of AI, we needed to understand what it is. It turns out there are many definitions of artificial intelligence out there that mostly describe computer systems that are capable of performing tasks that normally require human intelligence. Some definitions describe AI as theory, while others say it's an ability or an interdisciplinary science. And as our team read about various definitions, we laughed and joked about how it reminds us of evaluation. As evaluation practitioners and academics, we know all too well that there is no universal definition of evaluation. Some consider it a discipline or profession, while others think of it as just a tool to be used within disciplines or professions. And as use-focused evaluation consultants, we think definitions are less important than understanding the utility in a specific context. So we can't really understand the purpose of artificial intelligence without understanding evaluator intelligence. For us, evaluator intelligence is all about valuing. We think of EI as values-based, driven by explicit and implicit values. It's about using data to inform value judgments and about being valuable for our users, communities, and commissioners. And with this context in mind, for us, AI is a tool that automates tasks to add value to our evaluation business and clients. Before we fully dove into using AI, it was really important for me to understand the business case about why it's worthwhile to invest the time, energy, and money building our AI capacity, especially when my first instinct was to fear that AI would replace us. But the truth is, technology evolves whether you're ready or not. And in the course of history, there have been many technologies that people were once afraid of that are now ubiquitous. For instance, electricity, cars, cell phones, the internet, and social media. If you think about it, at one point, people were really freaked out about all of these things and how they would change their lives. But now, obviously, we can't imagine life without them. And second, organizations need to adapt to stay relevant. For example, at one point, office life looked like this, and then this, and now for many of us, still this. So for businesses to survive, we have to be adaptive and open to change. And it means not being afraid that AI is going to steal our jobs, but adapting our services and pricing structures to incorporate AI responsibly. And even more specific to our field of evaluation, evaluators are constantly keeping up with trends in the field. For example, at one point, quantitative RCTs were the gold standard in the field. And then people started being more open to qualitative methods to understand nuance under the surface. And these days, almost every evaluation design has a purposeful mix of both, recognizing the value of integrating quant and qual. Another good example of changing trends in our field is the transition from more linear theories of change to more complex theories of transformation. And I really like this particular screenshot because it demonstrates how Michael Quinn-Patton's thought leadership has evolved from writing books to being a YouTube influencer. And I think that's a really great example of changing trends in the field. There's also movements towards reimagining the purpose and practice of evaluation through equitable evaluation initiative. And even more recently, there are trends towards revitalizing causal pathways in evaluation, which I think is really interesting because a decade ago, there's a whole movement rejecting causality in the field. So those are all the reasons why small businesses have to stay on top of innovations in the field to stay relevant, even in evaluation. And when it comes to AI in particular, we can use technology to free up our time and increase our value to clients. For us, this means we can have more time to innovate and tinker with methods or approaches. We can serve as more strategic thought partners. Sometimes we end up being more like counselors or coaches as our clients navigate challenges. And lastly, we find ourselves holding a mirror for our clients, offering clarity and fresh perspective. And this role really benefits from added time and space to see things clearly. And AI can give us that.
Hi, Nina. Just a quick pause. We have an
Sure.
international audience who's asking to slow down just a tad. They're having a little bit hard time keeping up here. Is that fine for you?
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that all. Lastly, saving time can increase our profitability. So as a small startup, we really believe that an abundance mindset will lead to better decision making and team dynamics. So when we think about how AI can help our business, we realize that it can help us save time, which ultimately helps us produce better quality of work and contribute to more positive impact in the world. And we really believe that a growing business with this kind of mindset is critical to expanding the pipeline for diversity and inclusion in the field and important for evaluation to compete with adjacent careers in the knowledge economy. And sorry if I sped through that purposefully. We do have a resource that I'm happy to share in the chat shortly that summarizes all of this in more detail. And we also have the NDE article that I'm happy to share. But I did want to get to the good part of this conversation, which is less about making the case and more about showing you how AI actually works in our practice. So with that, I'm going to actually stop sharing, or no, I'll keep sharing for this part but let Blake take over from here. And then I'll have Blake share his screen to show you the demo.
All righty, thank you, Nina. Yeah, and as we learned from that poll, there's some varying degrees of interest and fear and excitement about this topic. I hope Nina has made the case that there are advantages for the business side of things to embrace these tools, or at least to experiment with them. And so now I want to switch gears a little and just talk about our experiences that we've had experimenting with some of these AI tools. And I want to provide a demonstration of one that has been incredibly helpful in our work. So, as Nina mentioned, with the advent of Chat GPT, we decided to start experimenting with these tools in earnest. We figured we wanted to see what was out there and try to get ahead of things if we could. Here's a list of tools that we've experimented with so far. Some of these tools are used for text retrieval, some for qualitative analysis. One of them is even used to conduct literature reviews for those who still have to write a lit review. That was Rayanne. That might be a useful tool for you all. But for experimenting with each of these tools, our general approach was to complete a specific task manually or traditionally in the way we would, and then to try to replicate that task using the AI tool to sort of elicit the pros and cons of each. And each tool had varying degrees of success in kind of matching the quality and I guess the usefulness of our traditional analysis. And as Nina said, you can follow this QR code, and someone asked for a link. We will definitely provide a link for the paper that we summarize some of these findings in. Yeah, and today, like I said, I want to really dig into this one tool called Coloop. Right, we felt this was the most advanced and relevant tool that we had used, and sort of offer the best bang for your buck, so to speak. Coloop's website describes it as a chat-style AI tool, for analyzing qualitative data, and it claims that it, can answer your qualitative questions 10 times faster than your research assistant. In our experience, I think that's a very conservative estimate. I think that it analyzes these things much faster than just 10 times. But at its heart, Coloop is a qualitative analysis tool to help produce meaningful and fairly accurate themes from qualitative transcripts of interviews and focus groups, right, using AI technology to do so. And I think recently they've even expanded their offerings to be able to start to analyze themes for open-ended survey items as well. But that's not fine-tuned yet. So to sort of give you a sense of, our typical interview focus group coding process, we generally follow these steps, right? We collect our data, we have the data transcribed, we engage in a manual review where each team member goes through and reads at least one of the transcripts, or everybody reads all of the transcripts, but just to get a sense of what's in them, we sort of generate initial themes that we're finding in the data. We get together as a group, we refine these themes, and then we actually go back through the transcripts and we code the transcripts for those themes. And usually we use a software like Deduce or MaxQDA or something like that. Then once we've coded all of the transcripts for the themes, we pull the quotes and pull the themes, and then we sort of do a higher level analysis of these themes. And then we integrate all of this into our final deliverables, our reports. And so I'm about to walk through a demo of Coloop with you all, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background on the data that we're using for this. So this data comes from an evaluation that we completed, I think, last year. It was a retrospective portfolio evaluation of a foundation's portfolio to increase access to oral health in the state of North Carolina. And so we used a mixed methods evaluation design with this whole evaluation. So we did a content analysis, and we did some surveys, and then we did a host of interviews. So now I'm going to jump in and show y'all how CoLoop works. All right, can you all see my screen? It's very dark. Now I'll try to pull this up so it doesn't really increase the text size or the text size. Apologies for that. So this is when you open CoLoop, this is sort of your landing platform. One really very convenient feature that it does is it will take an audio transcript, or it takes an audio file, excuse me, and it automatically creates a transcript. So like many of us who are doing interviews on Zoom, you can automatically upload that to CoLoop and it will create a transcript for you. And I just want to demo that. Nope, that is not what I want to do. Apologies. There it is. All right, so it is uploading this. So while it's uploading that, I also wanted to show you an additional feature. So when you're setting up your project, it provides you with these fields. This open discussion guide asks you for any background on the project, or basically your question protocol, right? So it wants to know what questions you ask participants throughout the study, and so you can provide that there. It asks for any objectives for the project. So what's the project trying to accomplish? It asks for project description. This is things like project context. So the place that the project's in, the group of people that the research is being conducted with or about, anything that might be contextually relevant that would help it make sense of the data that you're providing it. And then this is new, this concept testing piece. This is where you add acronyms, or you add names of people, names of organizations. If words don't mean what they typically mean in common English, or whatever language you're speaking. I know this works in multiple languages. You can clarify all that there so that it's aware that Susan is the head of such and such organization, and such organization has this relationship to the evaluand or to the stakeholders. So once you've set that all up, then you upload your data. It looks like this. And then to complete your transcript, you have to name the number of speakers that it has, and it will go ahead and do that. Once it's uploaded, it looks something like this. Obviously, you get your transcript here, and these are not people's real names. I gave fake names as promised. It'll give you your transcript here, but it will also give you a summary of the document here. So as you're going back and you're like, oh, didn't someone say something about this? And I think it was so-and-so, or maybe it was so-and-so. You can go and you can check what they said. Yeah, and then it provides an even more concise summary, sort of a play-by-play of a consolidated play-by-play of your conversation. So yeah, basically once you upload the transcript, you need to assign a speaker name, and you also need to assign a role. So it has a role of researcher and participant. And I think it can do up to 10 different speakers. So you can have one researcher and up to 9 participants. So for focus groups, it can actually differentiate the different voices in the groups are in fact different people, which is very, very convenient. And then you can even assign them names, because as we see, it will analyze the data based on the person speaking. So, okay, so all your data is uploaded. Now then, how do you actually use it? Like, what's the value of this? So you get this grid here, and you can just type in a question, and it will answer that question for you. So I'm going to type in, once you paste in, my question is, what are the major challenges for increasing access to oral health in North Carolina? That's my question. Hit enter. And you can imagine, you reading through all of the transcripts and saying, okay, I want to compile a list of all of the challenges that there are to increasing access to oral health care, and that'd take easily, I don't know, hours and hours, tens, 12s, 15s of hours. So it's already started. So basically, it provides you with this output, which is organized by, it's still working on the summary, the overall summary. Oh, there it goes. It's finished. Of everybody, but then it also provides you what each individual person said about the challenges to creating access to oral health care in North Carolina. And as we can see, the challenges are, general, there's workforce and resource shortages. That's the case with most projects and most work with foundations. Systemic inequities and barriers, diversity and representation challenges in collaboration and impact measurement, financial constraints, rural access and academic investment, and need for innovative solutions and policy advocacy. And some of you will say, well, rural access and academic investment are two very, very different things. And I would agree. And so this isn't a substitute for you having to do the thinking, but this is a very, very quick way for you to organize the data around these themes. So you do still have to sort of go back and you have to read through the themes and you have to check. And one of the best ways to check is to click on one of these. So let's say, challenges in collaboration and impact measurement. And this is what it's saying the sub themes are. So lack of involvement of dental partners in oral health initiatives. And say, okay, well, what evidence are you using to generate that theme? And then it takes you right to the quotes that it's using, and it gives you a little bit of context for each of these, and it highlights in purple what it used to generate that theme. So if you're like, that doesn't ring true to me, you can go back and then you can check and make sure that the actual meaning that it made is the same meaning that you would have made. And then you may say, well, what if, I want to be sure that this thing is not just pulling random information from the internet to generate these answers, right? Like ChatGPT will just pull, data from everywhere to try to give you a response. But it is in fact pulling data from the transcripts that I gave it. So I asked the question, is Wolverine cooler than Batman? Presumably, we didn't discuss that during our interviews with oral health practitioners in North Carolina. So I posed that question, and it's thinking. Hopefully, it shouldn't think too long about it. But as you can see, it says there's no relevant answers. Dave did not discuss whether Wolverine is cooler than Batman in the provided excerpts, right? So it's not pulling information from the internet. It's only using the data that you give it, which is kind of cool because it's taking for face value and filtering out all of your preconceptions that you have as you do the coding, which is neat. So that's essentially CoLoop. It's a very, very simple function, very simple interface. It doesn't do a lot, but it does it very quickly, and it does it very well. So I'm going to hop back in here. All right. So, comparing this to our traditional approach, it obviously took care of the data transcription, right? That's not an extra charge that comes with it. So the money you'd be spending on something like Scribby or Upwork, you just don't need to spend that anymore. It's pretty great. You still do, your team does need to engage in the manual review process of the data, right? As the researcher, you need to know what's in there because it's going to give you themes, but you want to have the context to be able to vet those things against your own knowledge and your own experience. It can do initial theme generation. So right, often it generated themes that we had missed. It can help refine themes. It can help you with the transcript coding, right? You don't need to go through that whole coding step because it kind of organizes, if you agree with the themes that it creates, all of that data is organized under that theme. So you don't have to manually go through and code your transcripts, which saves a ton of time. So obviously, the main opportunity here with a tool like this is, that it is faster, right? It's much faster than manual coding, and it does, as we discuss in our article, it does have a similar level of accuracy, right? Like when we compared the themes that we generated to those that it created. In fact, not only did it identify the same themes that we did, it was a bit more comprehensive and a bit more specific, right? So it casts kind of a wider net and a less porous net. So it's catching things that we had missed. Right. And as I already mentioned, right, because it's only using the data that you feed it, right? It isn't looking for certain themes over others, right? Which can help sort of reduce some of the coder bias, right? A lot of times, like you had a conversation and something stuck out to you in the conversation, and you really want to go in and get that, and you sort of miss other things in the process. It treats all the data as equal, right? So it's catching, I guess, a greater breadth of what the data has to offer. Right, it's very convenient that the information is clearly referenced and linked to the source, so you can vet the information for yourself. You can vet the themes and make sure that they're accurate. This can increase client responsiveness. I know a lot of your students, I'm not entirely sure of the entire composition of the audience, but it's often the case, when you're sitting in a meeting with someone who maybe hasn't been involved throughout the process, and like, oh, I wonder if the data could do this, or I wonder if people said something about this. What do you guys think? And it's not something that you necessarily coded for, but it is there, and you could provide like an inkling of a response. This could allow you to sort of quickly dive in and get that information from your transcripts without having to spend the 4 or 5 hours hunting and pecking to do that. It is nice that it accommodates multiple data types. Like I said, interview and focus groups is its key strength right now, but it's starting to incorporate open-ended survey items, and it's a newer tool, so they're still in development. It can reduce costs across the board. It's $250 a month. But when you think about, what your coder is charging an hour, easily 3-4 hours, that's the cost of that. So if you're doing this type of work often, and you have, more than 6-7 transcripts a month, it balances out in terms of cost. And doing this, also enables, I think, smaller teams to take on larger projects and undertake more, extensive data analysis, right? Because we're not spending dozens and dozens of hours coding, we can be spending a larger chunk of that time speaking with more people and getting more perspectives and more thoroughly understanding the issues that we're investigating. There are some challenges. It does have slight variations on reruns. I mean, such as the nature of how AI works. So it never gives you a definitive set of themes. And there may be, an effective sample size on this variation. So that's worth considering. Right. How prevalent are the themes? There's, how do I say this? It tends to index almost everything that it finds, whereas I think a human coder would say, well, I'm going to talk about this theme because more than 3 of my participants talked about it, right? It doesn't do that. It just throws everything in there. So it's worth considering like the prevalence and the relevance of themes, but it will tell you how many people have discussed a theme. So at least lets you know that information. You can decide whether you want to include that or not. I talked about the over indexing of data. It does necessitate human evaluator intervention. Again, you can't you can't just give it all your data and hope for the best and still have a meaningful client experience. Like you have to write these reports. You have to make sense of this data in the context of of your evaluand. So you still do need to go through and you do need to read the transcripts. You need to make sure that what's being produced is accurate, but that also you have an understanding so you can explain the results. It can be cost prohibitive for teams that don't do a lot of qualitative methods. And it's a brand new tool, so the research base is not really there yet. But I think, so like I would be leery of using something like this for something like a dissertation or a publishable paper. But for evaluation work, I think this is perfectly suitable. And with that, I will pass it back over to Nina for her closing thoughts.
Like, I wouldn't say that there is no research base. On Coloup's website, there's a lot of case studies of use cases, and I would personally use it for a dissertation or a publishable paper. It's just important that it's not the only thing you're using. Like Blake said earlier, you have to be involved as the researcher, as the evaluator. You have the context, you understand the research questions, the evaluation questions, and like Blake was saying, when we use it, we first read all the transcripts. We're the ones conducting the interviews. We're the ones intimately familiar with what what we're looking at. What's the criteria for the evaluation? What's the theory of change? We understand all of that going into it, and we review the transcript with that lens, and then we use Coloop to just check and to make some of the initial coding process faster. But it doesn't mean we're not doing the work as well alongside it. So anyway, just some initial thoughts, and we do want to cover some of the big privacy questions and ethics. And really, even though we're so excited about the potential for AI to increase our efficiency and our value, there's still so much that AI cannot do. First and foremost, relationships. The hardest and most rewarding part of our work as evaluation consultants is working with people and communities. And AI cannot put in the care and consideration needed to foster that kind of trust-based relationships that are built on values and a sense of safety and the invitation to participate in sense making, co-creation, reciprocal learning, which is all critical to our practice. When it comes to creativity and practicality, there is still so much that AI cannot do. It can help us with data collection and analysis, but it can't tell stories. It can't frame results or develop final products in a way that is compelling and useful. It doesn't have the ability to innovate or influence or inspire. It can't make strategic decisions based on the context and values. And last, but certainly not least, AI cannot ensure diversity of voices that are included in the evaluation, especially those from marginalized communities, nor can it be accountable for being anti-racist in and of itself. At the end of the day, it's a tool. So if we want to be anti-racist and we want to be equitable in our practice, that's on us for how we use the tool. And so that's just really important. All of that to say, there's a great use case for why we should use AI, and our jobs are still safe, and we feel like there's still a lot that AI cannot do. Speaking of which, when it comes to the role of evaluators in using AI, it's important that we are proactive. We can engage in conversation and reflection, not only with each other about how we're using AI, but also with developers of AI products to really understand how AI is developed, making sure that the data is safe. And we'll talk again about the privacy in a few slides. And we can really be seen as critical thought partners regarding issues of AI and equity, the intended and unintended communities, about how AI can or may be affecting communities. We should be thinking about evidence-based practice and posing and answering important questions, like many of the methodological questions that have been in the chat, like the way that we've used AI in our practice, which is not just using it and accepting results at face value, but using it and questioning the credibility and questioning the results and using it within our own practice. And lastly, we can bring learnings and concerns to new audiences. So we love experimenting with AI and talking about it, which is why in the chat I shared our NDE article. I also shared a practice guide that we just developed yesterday. So it is hot off the press. And we do think it's our responsibility as users of the products to share back what we're learning. And so these ideas about roles for evaluators, were written out by Reed in the 2023 NDE volume. So encourage you to check out that article. Eileen Reed came up with these roles. And of course, there's things that are keeping us up at night. These questions are also inspired by Eileen's article in the NDE volume. There are definitely implications for equity. To what extent are tools discriminatory even in their design, or have the potential to uphold discriminating practices? How can we ensure equal access to technologies? How do unregulated tools perpetuate harmful ideas and structures like racism, homophobia, misogyny? What happens with user data? How secure is it? Where is it stored? Who is it shared with? These are all really important and valuable questions to grapple with. And the implications for ethics: how does it impact human subjects? Research with explicit consent from participants. What are the environmental concerns? Again, really, really, really valuable questions and valid questions to ask. In fact, because we're such big proponents of CoLoop, we wanted to get to the bottom of these questions. And so last Friday, we went live on LinkedIn with Jack Bowen, who's the co-founder of CoLoop, to discuss all of this. Because frankly, as users of the tools, we did not know the answers to these questions. So we wanted to go straight to the source to understand what are we using, what's happening with the data, all these questions that you all are answering. So some things that we learned from this conversation with Jack, and the recording of this LinkedIn Live is available on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share that in the chat shortly. But a few takeaways from that conversation that really helped us understand. For one, CoLoop only stores the data that you upload. So it's the same as your intranet, something like if you use Google Drive or if you use Box, it's the same setup, that it stores the data that you upload it like an email client, and it completely deletes the data when you delete it. So when you do upload the data sits on a big, private, heavily encrypted database, similar to Google Drive, similar to Gmail and all those email clients. And when you ask a question about the data after you upload it, like Blake did in the demo, it is retrieved and the data itself is used to generate an answer and securely pass it back to you. But when you delete the data, it's completely wiped from the database and it does not retain information. This is a really important piece of it because there's a difference between training data and inference. And CoLoop never trains or retains data. Instead, it utilizes inference to respond to queries. So CoLoop is really only as biased as the data that you give it. So for example, on ChatGPT, there's a lot of concern because that is an OpenAI platform that scrapes the whole internet. And of course, the whole internet is full of systemic inequities, bias, racism, all the things that are wrong with the people who upload things to the internet exist on the internet. And so when you use something like ChatGPT, all of that bias comes in. But when you use something like CoLoop, which does have a cost to it, it is $250 a month per user. But part of that cost is because it is a secure platform where you log in with your username, your password, you upload the data, and that's the only place that the data lives. It cannot be used to train other people's experience with CoLoop. It's not retaining any information. It's just using the data that you're giving it. So that kind of protects CoLoop from some of the implications that people are worried about when it comes to privacy and ethics on open AI tools like ChatGPT as an example. That being said, CoLoop was built on some foundational models that are the same models that ChatGPT was built on. So CoLoop was pre-trained using some of those foundational models. And it is important to know that, but it does not train and retain data. It was just pre-trained on data. So and that's worth asking questions about, like who was the first person that developed OpenAI and what were their, like, how did they think about ethics when designing the program? The way that I think about it, I feel really strongly about this conversation related to diversity, equity, and inclusion and AI. But I feel that to put the pressure on designers to be open and transparent about these things, I think that women, people of color, people from marginalized communities have to be the ones to also be using and advocating for these things and asking the hard hitting questions and having the conversations, which is why I had that conversation with Jack to begin with. Because I'll admit, at first I was afraid to use AI because of all the unknowns, and I'm not a technical person. I don't understand computer programming. So there was so much that I didn't know. But instead of being afraid of it and not using it and judging it before I used it, our team has used it and we've had those conversations and we've read the fine print and we've done our homework to try to understand. And those are the kind of conversations that we also have with our clients. And we're learning more every day, and we're improving our practice by improving our own internal policies related to privacy and data use, as we learn about these tools and figure out how to use them. But I really do feel strongly that they're not going anywhere. So it's like, if you're not going to beat it, you might as well join it, and use it as a tool to make your practice better, not to replace your practice by any means. And so I heard that there's issues with this QR code, but we did post the link in the chat. I'm happy to also post the link to that LinkedIn Live. Let me grab that really quick. If you want to move to the next slide, Blake. This is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional question. I think that there's some more questions in the chat, so happy to answer what else is coming up.
There are. Thank you so much, Nina and Blake. I would say there's three main buckets of additional privacy questions, ethics questions, and then just capability questions of CoLoop. For all of you, we're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. But just to start out, I think there were, as you saw, there was a lot of questions coming in both the Q&A and the chat around privacy. And so some additional on top of what you shared, can you just talk about your experience for clients who are weary of using AI, how you communicate this tool or your use of this tool to those clients?
Sure, happy to speak on that. Sorry, one second. I'm just putting in this. Okay, in the chat, I just popped in the link to the LinkedIn Live recording where Jack can really get into the details better than I can about some of the privacy questions. So I encourage you to check that out. And now to the question about how we talk to our clients about AI. It's a really good question. And to be completely honest, and just transparent, it's something we're still working on. We're developing internally our own policies related to AI, and we have a data privacy policy. So for example, the data that we upload is anonymized, or de-identified. We delete data after the analysis, after a certain amount of time. So we have these practices already in place, and when we use the tools, we make sure to follow those practices. But when we first started using AI tools, we did not necessarily feel the need to ask our clients for permission, because if you think about it, we have a ton of products and softwares on our tech stack. We use Slack, we use Zoom. Here we are on Zoom right now. We use Google Drive. We use all different types of online products like Deduce, like Grammarly, some of them that are built on AI. All of those, AI is not new. In fact, a lot of the software that we use has AI components to it. And we don't feel the need to ask our clients about checking whether their data can exist on all these platforms, whether we can use all these platforms for analysis. And so in that same vein, when we first started using AI, more than anything, we were using it as an experiment to see what it could do and see what it was capable of. But again, not in replace of what we were doing. We would do the work, we would do it with AI, and we would compare the difference. And so in those early stages of experimenting, we weren't really talking to clients about it. But now that we are publishing about it, that we're speaking about it, that we're using it more as an integral part of our work, we are having those conversations with clients. We are starting to write it into proposals, to write it into our methodologies, but it's an earlier practice and we're still learning a lot. And again, we're not AI experts by any means. We were just not afraid to try it and learn out loud. And so it's been a journey for sure. I hope that answers some of your questions. I saw that there was also questions about document analysis. At this point, CoLoop is not built for doing long form documents or content analysis. It's really more about interviews open-ended survey questions and focus groups, and it works best when there's a back and forth where it can clearly see who's the researcher and who's the respondent.
Hey, I can
There,
hop in with the next question. Or let's Blake, go ahead, please.
there's a tool called AI Lies. It's AILYZE that does do longer document content analyses. But they also use they use a human on their end as well. So the pricing for that is kind of different depending on what you're doing. It can be more, it can be less. But that's a tool worth checking out as well.
Thanks for that. So you'd already answered Shay's question about where the data is coming from. You mentioned that the data or that the AI is using is coming from the actual text that you're putting in. But there was a question about data retrieval. Is there a way that, let's say, at the end of the day, you want to take your data out of Coloop, for example? Is that a possibility?
Yes, absolutely. You can delete the data from Coloop and it completely wipes it. There's no retaining data. It was never used to train the model. So it's just gone.
I wouldn't use
And
it as your
Coloop,
only storage space for it though.
right.
Yeah.
And on Coloop's website, they have a lot of information about the different vendors that they use, the different products behind the product. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's many layers of security. They are compliant with, what is it, the GDPR. Coloop is based in the UK, so and they are compliant with the GDPR rules of the EU and with CCPA, which is a California compliance privacy regulation.
I think you're muted, Lisa.
I can ask the next question just connected with Coloop's capabilities. There was a person asked how good is it at picking up different accents outside of the USA and UK?
And Jack just spoke about this, right? Nina, do you remember what he said?
I think they're improving that capability. They're working on it. As of now, it can only be used for English. I think Australian English, American English, British English. But when it comes to accents, I don't know, Blake, have you tried it?
No,
But
I
isn't
think
there a way that you can
yeah, you
say what
can
accent it is?
yeah, but he said for a broader, more omnibus tool using the American or the US English accent because we have more variety, so it's able to pick up more to that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that could be a current limitation of the tool. One thing that we like about Coloop is it feels like us. It's also a startup. We're a small startup of 5, and they're a small startup of 5. And we have been part of the beta of the program. So when we first started experimenting with AI tools, they reached out to us to be part of their beta. And so we've been in really close collaboration in helping building the product and building it in a way that we know will be useful for qualitative researchers and evaluators. So that has made it kind of a special experience and helped us be able to provide that direct feedback with them. And so we know that they're constantly updating, and even in the year that we've used the product, it's changed a lot and gotten better.
There was one other question. This one was interesting. They use sociological terms like manifest, level, and one other that I'm not an expert on, but I'm assuming that's in relation to tone. So can Coloop pick up different tones? You'd mentioned how there are nuances with implicit bias and racism that's built into these learning models. Can it pick up any of those like personalities or other symbolism in those transcripts?
I haven't seen that come through. Like if someone's saying something sarcastically, I think that it would take it at face value and it would use the text and the through the language processing because it's not actually it's using the audio to create the transcripts, but the analysis is happening on the transcripts, not on the audio. So it's not picking up tone of voice and those types of things.
That's a great question. And I think it speaks to the limitation. I think really what it's best for is helping make that first round of coding process more efficient And to be honest, it did pick up on things that we did not find. Like as qualitative researchers, we are bringing in our own bias, and that's especially when we're working on evaluations where we are working with them to test their theory of change, for example. We know what we're looking for. We know how the client is defining success. And so we do have that bias when we begin our analysis. And COLIP does not have that kind of bias. So on one hand, there's concerns about the bias baked into AI because of who created the programs and whether or not there's diversity in the developers themselves. But on the other hand, there's this humility in realizing that as qualitative researchers, we too bring bias to the table, and CoLoop itself is just a tool. So all it's doing is taking what you're giving it and summarizing and filtering and pointing things out that maybe you might have missed if you were searching for something and you had your own idea of what the data should be saying.
We're not going to be able to get to every question, but there is one more question about plagiarism, asking how you deal with plagiarism concerns or questions.
I think plagiarism in AI is usually a bigger issue with something like ChatGPT, for example. If you asked it, write an introduction about, whatever your topic is, then ChatGPT will just scrape the internet and probably be plagiarizing from different sources, and you have no way of checking that. But with CoLoop, it's really just a tool to analyze the data that you give it. So if you're giving it, 10 different interview transcripts and you're asking it a question, it will summarize with using themes, and you can click on what it's summarizing. You can click on the themes that it's developed and see the direct quotes. So for example, if in your qualitative analysis you wanted to present illustrative quotes, you could click on the theme and pull the quotes directly, or you could see how it's summarized and you can make the judgment if whether or not you want to be using the direct language from the participant or you want to be writing it differently. But the good news is that it's not pulling outside of your transcript. So it's not just pulling from the web. And that helps. I mean, that alleviates or that reduces any risk of plagiarism, or it just avoids the issue completely.
Thank you again, Nina and Blake from Intention to Impact. Today we were invited to consider how the use of artificial intelligence can strengthen our evaluator intelligence, and considered, and we're in the beginning, all of the AI tools that are out there for us, but really focused on CoLoop and how it can strengthen efficiency in our coding and our organization and setting of themes. And we're reminded that it's really a tool to open up time and help with those qualitative evaluator the things that we focus on, which are building relationships and really getting deeper into the needs and the situations of the programs and the communities that we're evaluating. We want to thank everyone for speaking today, and thank you to the audience for joining us. We really appreciate the time that you spent with us today speaking about AI and evaluation. Our next webinar is on April 11th on evaluation use in multilateral development institutions with Dr. Jos Vesson, and then Yasmin will be putting the link in the chat now. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.